Hello, everyone. This is Adam Williams, and you're listening to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. I'm very excited today to be joined by Bryan Southwick. He is not only the design manager for Gensler, he is one of their go-tos for food and beverage, which is the way we were originally connected. I thought it would be an incredible time to just sit down and hear his perspective of, what is changing with design in the food and beverage world right now. But just he like me, has a lot of friends and close connections in the food and beverage world. I thought it would be a really good time to just take a minute and discuss that. Bryan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Adam. I'm really excited to be here. And, I think you kicked it off. It's a very exciting time in food and beverage, mostly because I think there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of fear right now about food and beverage and restaurants. A little bit of background on myself. Only been in Charlotte for 3.5 years. And actually when I arrived, everybody said, I need to meet you. So that's how we met.
They were trying to get you to leave, man. We got enough outsiders here. They thought I could scare you away.
I was hoping you can give me the in, because I know it's you know everybody in town. So no, it's been good to make the transition to Charlotte. I was in San Francisco prior for almost 15 years. I have the typical story. I followed a girl out to San Francisco. She's now my wife, so that gives me some credit. But when we were in San Francisco, I didn't, a trained architect, licensed architect. I went to Virginia Tech. Didn't really know restaurant design was even something to get into. I joined a firm out in San Francisco, Cass Calder Smith Architecture, and it focused on kind of custom single family residential and restaurants, and just kind of fell into that world. I think there's a lot to be said with chefs and chef culture and architecture, and just, an overall joy for relaxing and having a meal. So started kind of designing restaurants, was about 5 years into it, and just decided, I'm starting to really pick up a specialty in this. Maybe I should diversify, and decided to kind of just double down and just focus on food and beverage. I could not get away from it. Designed plenty of great restaurants in San Francisco. For personal reasons, looked at opportunities in Charlotte and came out here. The way I look at Charlotte right now, and the reason that I'm drawn to Charlotte as a designer and as someone who loves food and beverages, when I was in San Francisco, I would imagine if I was in San Francisco in the late 80s, early 90s, and just the opportunity for growth that city had, that's what I feel Charlotte has right now. It is just continually growing, and there's so much retail opportunity where San Francisco had sort of hit its ceiling, and there was a lot of competition. So it's been great to get involved in this local market and help really define the city and the communities that we're part of.
Let's take a step back before we, because me, I'll just completely nerd out on retail and on design and infrastructure. I'll put the entire audience to sleep with that. But before we do that, walk me through how you kind of carved out this specialty of food and beverage. What I tell people all the time, that when you walk into a restaurant and you're just a layman that walks in and just likes to eat at nice restaurants, everybody thinks the money is spent on that beautiful chandelier at the front door, or that beautiful piece of furniture behind the hostess stand. People don't understand that restaurants are insanely complex. I liken it to building a battleship, where every single inch matters, every single square foot matters in a massive way. And if one thing is wrong, it sets off a really, really bad domino effect. And I think that a lot of people would shy away from that type of specialty because it's just so nuanced, and which is why I have a lot of people tell me that I'm crazy to do what I do, because it's a lot more complex and annoying, frankly, than doing office, where you're more worried about ceiling tiles and urinals, and it's pretty straightforward. walk me through, as you were kind of carving out that niche, was that something that got you really excited, or is that just kind of the cost you had to pay to really carve out your niche? Walk me through kind of getting your feet wet and doing those first deals, and walk me through that process for you.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think designing restaurants are a lot easier than operating and owning the business. So I give a lot of credit to the restaurant partners and the chef-driven restaurants. But designing restaurants, it is true. I think the way I like to think of them, you gotta build a tank that looks like a Ferrari. So it's, and I think that's what's most interesting about it, is it. As
I'm going to steal that, by the way. I'm just telling you right now, I'm going to use that.
No, go for it. I think it helps balance, the left side and right side of your brain. They're super complex conceptually. You're trying to realize a culinary vision that a restaurant group or a chef has. And then there's just practical, technical sides of operation and durability. And I think that's what makes them interesting. I think that's what continually, I keep, going back to, jumping into restaurants and doing them. And then scaling in different sizes, when they get larger, and just instead of the single family or single, restaurant, but it's, food halls or, food markets, there's a complexity that I think that food and beverage touches many things. It's into gaming, it's into recreation, a lot of things that, that touch our everyday life, and we all have to eat. So, when I left architecture school, I thought, okay, maybe someday I'll design museums and design really important public spaces. But what I found, especially in San Francisco, and I think you can see it in areas like Charlotte, these are the experiential destinations that people want to go. They're almost, in some sense, I know it's not, so great to say, but they're more popular than museums. They become this, this communal space that it's either your neighborhood restaurant or it's the new hot destination in town. But they're highly trafficked, they're highly visited, and people have an affinity for them.
So walk me through the differences between designing restaurants in San Francisco, designing them in Charlotte. Obviously, I would assume, first off, the volumes are, some of the highest grossing restaurants in the country are in San Francisco, in California. But beyond that, and this can be, personal preference. It can be design aesthetic. It can be whatever. Walk me through a couple of things that have really jumped out to you when you went from designing in San Fran versus designing on the East Coast.
I mean, there's a few things from the business side, and I think that's been my focus in Charlotte, or been more my passion lately, is really trying to understand the vision for chef and restaurant groups, because you can realize a concept or you can realize a design, but if it doesn't pencil out for an ROI, then there's no point in putting that effort. So, a lot of that business minded approach comes into, how many turns a restaurant's going to take, and I think Charlotte, doesn't have the critical mass yet to make multiple turns of destination restaurants. And I think it taxes restaurants to a point. I mean, a new restaurant in San Francisco, it'd be 18 months before you can get into it, and get a reservation. So I think Charlotte has that potential, and I think you see it in certain groups. But I think, restaurants need to turn over having that sort of initial spark and in word of mouth to becoming, fill in with regulars, and, not have diners sort of lose interest. I think that's some of the challenge. I think from a design standpoint, and I think it ties into the concepts, I think there's a huge focus on design here in Charlotte. I mean, in San Francisco, there was as well, but it's gearing towards kind of more the lo-fi, low-tech, approach to down and dirty restaurants, where I think there's some well-built restaurants here in Charlotte, and I think that it's very competitive. I think bottom line, with this marketplace, I think there's going to be more competition for chef-driven restaurants and restaurants that are born of the Carolinas. I think there's a lot of restaurants from surrounding areas that come here, know the makeup, know how to make it successful, and then already have the recipe. But I think there's a huge arena for the local chef-driven and chef owned brand restaurants.
So while we're talking about Charlotte restaurants, the knock on Charlotte restaurants in particular, and I hate that we're keeping things so local. We'll bring things out to a more macro level here shortly. But when you look at Charlotte, the knock was always that we were kind of a meat and potatoes, middle of the fairway, corporate expense account restaurant group focused city. And honestly, I think it was 100% warranted. I think we were. I think that the concepts were just too safe. Who do you think is going out there and kind of changing that narrative? What restaurants are you seeing that are going out there taking chances and doing things a little bit differently and helping kind of change that stereotype?
I mean, I think you're touching on a lot of things because, there's a lot of restaurants I can mention that I'm a fan of. But I think in general, I think the perception coming here 3.5 years ago was probably that. But I think it's changing rapidly. And I think it's because they're people from, it is the transplants coming from New York or San Francisco or, Washington, D.C. that they expect a different level of offering than maybe Charlotte was providing. I think there's a sense of risk involved. Restaurateurs they have to, play to their audience, and that probably is the majority of the audience is the expense account, high dollar price, more, fine dining than kind of casual. And I think that it's against what most people want to do, which is eat out more, eat better food, spend less, be more comfortable. And I think that's going to pull the market in a different direction. So I think, there's some great restaurateurs out there. There's no sense in naming names and talking through favorite restaurants, but I think the ones that are chef driven, forward thinking, trying to do something different, I think are going to get attention. And, in the same sense, I think that was up until the middle of this year. I think where we've taken a huge step back and looking at what is important now. And I think most people have kind of come to two things. They want to eat what's comfortable and they want to stay hyper local. And that has to do with just the current environment that we live in. So I think you can still execute on a very high level and still, do food that's familiar. But I think there's also going to be a lot of opportunity for brands and for concepts here that are different. I think there's a lot of areas of growth in ethnic food and different types of food offering at a higher level than just kind of mom and pop shops that I think will do well here. I think that's needed.
So pre-COVID, obviously you have to preface everything with pre-COVID because right now we're all sitting at home wishing we could go back to our normal lives a lot of times. What national trends or national operators had your attention? What did you look at and say, yeah, this is going to be around a little while. This is smart. This is going to continue. And that could be the movement towards smaller restaurants. It could be the movement towards fresh, healthy, to go. It could be, I'm sure we see a lot of the same things, but either who nationally had your attention. It doesn't have to be a national concept. It doesn't have to be Cheesecake Factory, right? It could be just something that you've seen in your travels, or what trends kind of had your attention that you thought, man, this is something that's going to be around a little while.
Well, I think we think that things changed greatly with COVID, but I think what it really happened is put a microscope to things that are already happening, which is, and this very intimately, right? Rent costs were high, labor costs were really taxing restaurants. And I think when you look at it, there was a lot of things not working in the industry, and it's sort of exposed things that we try to sweep underneath the table. Food costs are going up, and we don't want to spend more for good food. We want to still have good value. So I think what it pushed is the kind of fine casual. And I think, there's a lot of fine casual brands out there that think that we're arcing and doing well. And I think even that have come here in Charlotte, Yahoo Kitchen, you got the Cavas of the world. Anything that's healthy, I think, is super hugely important right now. I think people want to eat healthy, they want to eat fast, they want to have comfort, they want to try something different. You need the value proposition to spend $4 to $6 more a meal for something that could be replacing, quote unquote, fast food. So I think those brands are going to continue to dominate. And I think, in this world right now where it's convenience, grab and go, to go modeling or delivery, that's just making perfect sense.
So how does, not to cut you off, but I completely agree with the Yaffas of the world. I eat at Yaffa more than any other restaurant in the city, especially now they built one that I can walk to. I eat there all the freaking time and love it. But is full service, is it going to come back anytime soon? I mean, what is your take on that? Because right now, obviously full service is a freaking nightmare, but it was already a challenge to get people to sit down and do their typical old school restaurant experience. Everybody wanted to grab it and eat it to go. How do you feel about full service dining?
I think that's the other side of the coin, is that I think the restaurants that are in the middle are going to suffer, because I think if you don't offer something different, whether it's a service level, if it's culinarily, or even you see gamifying experiences, experiential dining, reasons to go out, reasons to for families, and I'm at the age now where I got to pay for a babysitter. If I don't have a tremendously good meal, I might not go back. So, where I'm going to vote with my dollars is going to depend on that level of experience. So I think we're splitting it really in the two in the middle. I think you're going to, between things that aren't going to survive in the middle, which is you're going to go convenience and you're going to go experiences. And I think, that's, as a designer and definitely a Gensler, we're hugely important into the experience index and in experiential retail. I think that's where it's, always been, hugely just fun to, do a blown out restaurant. But the flip side of the coin, it's also been really interesting to look at how do you roll out concepts that have that design level, but it's also kind of, quick and casual and convenient. And, so I think those are the two trends that have already really started. It's just COVID has pushed us to this direction where, I think fine dining is going to be redefined. I think people are going to want to have really high-end experiences. I think unfortunately if you don't take a stake and have something different to offer, it's going to be really hard to compete in the marketplace. So, and I think that's going to happen, there's going to be a lot of turnover in restaurants. It's already happening, and in the coming year or so, I think there's going to be an opportunity for new space and new concepts. And I think that's going to breathe new life into cities. The restaurant groups that really know how to manage and bring something different to the table are going to be very attractive.
Yeah, I can tell you from my business, obviously I'm in the commercial real estate business. I'm in the brick and mortar business, which has been already interesting to say the least. And now, yet to be seen what the next chapter looks like. But in my business, we were constantly looking for, Amazon resistant kind of concepts, and we were going all experiential, right? It was all about awesome restaurants. It was all about awesome, to your point, gaming. It was all about, everything from, it's not a Bilo anymore. It's a trampoline park. It's not a regular restaurant anymore. It's a duck pen bowling alley. It's a yada, yada, yada. Food halls, obviously massive, massive trend, but all of those are predicated on lots of people.
Yep.
And in not a lot of space. And I am unbelievably interested to see kind of how this affects what innovation is this going to breed? What change is this going to breed? How can we continue to give the consumer what they want from a retail standpoint? How do we continue to drag them through experiences away from a computer screen? I would love to hear your take on that. And then after that, I would love to just hash out what you think new deals are going to look like. If you see this going more into the pop-up direction, into the micro kind of concept direction. I'd love to hear your thoughts on both of those things.
Yeah, I think it goes back to real estate, really. The overhead costs that a restaurant has to have is going to be negotiated right now, and that's really, it already was with going back to landlords and asking for rent to be withheld. So with that, I think it's I hate to keep saying this because everybody says it, but I think technology will help to solve some of this, and I think you're seeing some of that with the Uber Eats, the Grubhubs, and the more and more of this idea of ghost kitchens. So I think it may not be exactly where we're getting our food anymore, but how we get our food, and it's either supporting it through prepared foods at your local grocery store. I mean, you talked about Amazon, the connection to Whole Foods. Is it just a different supply chain and delivery at this point of getting things that we want to eat and eating well? And I think there's a lot of that is kind of the buzz in the industry right now, and I think there's this capacity to think that ghost kitchens are a negative impact, but if it's really delivering a high quality product, supporting local farmers, really going back to something that is giving back to the community, I think it just changes that whole transactional interaction of getting quick and convenient. And then, I think on the flip side, the rent changing, the how deals can be changed, I think food halls will change that. I think, if you were a restaurateur and you had, a very limited resources to build out a restaurant, would you want to get a culmination of other restaurateurs and other, food operators that are like-minded like yourself and get a volume of people that are together and having a shared experience, or would you want to go after your own standalone brick and mortar? I think they're looking at structuring food hall deals differently. Cushman Wakefield was talking about not having long-term lease deals, but almost licensing agreements, so that it's a different type of lease structure, and it helps both the landlord and the leasee. And so I think I think areas that we're going to feel safe to go together, because we're also thinking about where this is going to be in a year. I think safety is still going to be a huge concern for people, even when we do get together. It's going to happen in larger spaces that you can control and get a higher density of people without feeling like you're crammed into a smaller restaurant to have that experience. And in the same I think looking at Charlotte, looking at the neighborhoods, I think they're very family. I keep going to family. I'm just I'm not in my 20s and 30s anymore, and so I think you got to look at restaurant spaces that can be the place for kind of multi-generation, the millennials and the older generation and the boomers. And I think that families right now, where I want to take my kids, food halls make sense. Variety and choice. Places that my wife and I can have 2 different meals. My kids can go get pizza if they want it. And so I think that's challenging in a traditional restaurant model. I think it's, forcing people. I think there's just way too much convenience and way too much opportunity right now for the consumer. And usually that means the consumer wins. And so I think as long as restaurateurs and business operators can tap into that, I think, there's the thing that I always love about restaurants is we may not have to shop, but we always have to eat, right? And I think there's not a choice of that. It's just whether you're supporting your local market, your grocer, or your local restaurant.
So let's switch into design a little bit. I would love to hear your take on kind of Instagrammable moments. I love this term, Instagrammable moments, because it used to just be called like really good design, but now it's called Instagrammable moments. Do you think that is going to continue to be as important as it's been for the last 24 months moving forward? Or do you think that we're going to go into a little bit more of a subdued kind of, let's pinch some pennies, let's just serve the food on a clean plate and get people out the door? Or do you think that we're going to have a return of high design when we get to the other side of this thing?
I mean, I like to think if you put the recipe of a restaurant to get together, design is like 10%. And that's not to say it's 10% important. It's just to say that it's 90% important to find the right location, the right products, the right business model, the right service model, all those things. So if we can provide 100% on that 10% or 150% on that 10%, it's going to push these restaurants over the edge. And, there's plenty of times where you go to a space and it's well designed, but if the food's not good or the location's not good, it's not going to survive. So we have to execute on design. It is hugely important. But I think what's changing is design matters. And, the diner's perception of design is changing as well. And I think people are becoming way more sophisticated. I think the world is more global. We're looking at things. And I think Instagram and social media has helped that. I mean, I think if we don't think Instagram has affected the beverage industry or will continue to affect the food beverage industry, I think you're just not paying attention. Even so much to now, pop-ups, takeout, temporary hours. I mean, I think the most reliable source I've ever seen is a restaurant's Instagram page to get the most important information. And I think that's really now how restaurants communicate with their audience. And restaurants are brands like everything else. They're smaller and they're just pumped up on steroids with the amount of design and the offering that they have. So, I think it's been cliche to talk about Instagrammable moments, but I think we're just talking about really, these great moments of experiential design. And everybody loves that experience where you go to a restaurant, it's got the right lighting, it's dimly lit, there's the right buzz going on, you're having your great company, great conversation. I think there needs to be a little bit more of putting the phone away and focusing on the company you have in hand. So I think it's a blessing and a curse because tons of people that go out and just photograph everything that they're eating. So you have to kind of balance capturing that perfect, Instagrammable, photo to tag with the direct experience you're having. But I think creating those opportunities within environments and within spaces become sort of the calling card. I think they are the thing that is the tapestry and the art that we have in the built environment.
So let's talk about James Beard, and I know that you're very close to that organization, passionate about that organization. It's, for people that don't know, I would consider it like the Oscars of the food and beverage industry, hospitality industry also. Walk me through, in your mind, what is the secret sauce or kind of that invisible thread that you can see that a lot of these James Beard Award winning restaurants have? And why can't we get one in Charlotte? I know we've been nominated a bunch of times, we keep falling short. What is it going to take for a restaurant to find that secret sauce and finally bring that to the city?
I think the answer to the direct question is probably just critical mass and a larger audience. I mean, James Beard, taking a step back, there's not a lot of, recognized industries out there that both celebrate awards and excellence, but also are hugely important for the welfare of the industry as a total. Like James Beard through COVID, really every week was providing outreach and support to, an industry that was hit really hard. The Independent Restaurant Coalition, employs, I think they were saying up to 11 million jobs at risk COVID. So, I think it's an industry that is truly got their thumb on the pulse of the entire industry as a whole, but the James Beard House and actually looking at what it would take to get, a Charlotte restaurant nominated as a James Beard Award winning either design or a James Beard Award winning chef. I think it's just going to take a few years of getting to the point. I think the nominated chefs here are on level with any other chef. I think, it's just a matter of, getting the outreach and bringing Charlotte up to, a comparable food market with DC, with New York, with LA, with San Francisco and others, which I think it has the potential to be. I think the city is just growing at a tremendous rate. And I think, there's no way they're not going to be able to pay attention to all the good things that their chefs that are doing here. But
it can't be all critical mass, Bryan, because we've got, Charleston is, obviously Charleston you would have to say has a better food scene than Charlotte, certainly per capita. Asheville, Raleigh. These cities aren't as big as Charlotte, certainly population wise, maybe tourism wise. And now obviously the restaurants in every one of those cities that I just mentioned are incredible. Really, really incredible. Not that Charlotte ones aren't, but it can't be just population and critical mass, right? Are you saying that maybe that Charlotte isn't looked at as being a competitive enough market or something like that?
Yeah, but I think it's also, I think it's Charlotte becoming a food destination and in one sense, but I think that's not to say that it has to be recognized. I think what Charlotte needs is an audience that's willing to allow a chef to be true and authentic. And I know those words are thrown around a lot, but to truly, bring a concept to the table that speaks and evokes something that is transcending. And I think there are some chefs that are just trailblazing in that. And I think there's a lot of chefs here that have been doing it for a very long time and not getting the recognition that they need. But I think it comes down to an audience that's allowing chefs to take certain risks and not be so conservative in what they're doing and to go out there and to take recognition. I think that, there's a tremendously rich heritage of the food of the South, going all the way from Charleston, Nashville, you talked about, up to Appalachia. And I think it has a long rooted history. And I think, it's elevating that to another level and being true to it is something that is interesting. Is when I was in California, everything was New American cuisine or California cuisine, or, it's pretty much Mediterranean. So I think it's the products. The products are excellent, and how the chefs can put it to the table. I think it's just allowing them to get to another level, another plateau. I think it's just a matter of time.
So, Bryan, you've already been extremely generous with your time. I want to hit you with some kind of quick knee-jerk questions before I let you go on with the rest of your day. But before I do that, would you let people know how to connect with you, how to connect with Gensler? You guys' digital footprint is incredible. Your portfolio of work is incredible. Tell people how they can learn a little bit more about what you guys do and what you do as a company.
Yeah, the beauty working at Gensler, I came from a small firm in San Francisco, and I feel like I'm still in a small family with Gensler, but Gensler being the largest sort of architecture and design firm in the world. We have connections in 6 continents in the world, almost 50 offices, or over 50 offices now. But in Charlotte specifically, it allows myself and a team under Kathleen Jordan and our growing retail practice to focus on these kind of specialty niches and really affect the growth of our city. So I think Gensler is tremendous in the fact of connecting, like working with you, the brokers, the developers, and also the tenants in town to really, focus and structure, shaping the city. And so, happy to be a part of it and just excited where it has to go. You can contact me. My email is Bryan, BRYAN _Southwick, SOUTHWICK @Gensler.com. Always call me on my cell. Still have a Bay Area code, but 650-269-4252. And, just happy to continue to do what I love and connect good people and tell their stories. All
right. So we've already talked about, so I get inspired when I talk to you guys, you and Kathleen are on the absolute cutting edge of this business. But where do you go to get inspired? This can be, another designer, another architect. It could be, a restaurant chain that you think has elevated. This could be, books of design, specific designers or architects over time. It can be periodicals, corporate rags. Like where do you go for inspiration, and what gets you excited that you see happening?
Yeah, I kind of learned early in my career, it's hard to always compare yourself with others because, you're going to bring services different and look at the world differently than everybody else. And there's so many, this restaurant design is so competitive, and, there are so many great firms out there locally, nationally, internationally. And I'm always inspired with the work that's being done. But where I get the most inspiration from, and it's been kind of trending as an arc over the last, decade, is brands. Is just thinking about, the design that you do, who you are as a brand, thinking about the companies you work for and their mission and brand, and then also thinking about restaurants as a brand. We always said culinary concepts, but restaurants are brands. So I'm always inspired about, the creation of brands. I think that brand design and marketing has probably more to do with retail at some points than true architecture and design. I think it's a component of it, but really trying to craft concepts and visions is what gets things led in the right direction. So strong brand designers out there and concept thinkers are really who inspire me most.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It always makes me so excited to walk into a place and say, hey, these guys started with the brand. It goes from the sign out front to the napkins that you're using and everything in between. And I like to nerd out on that stuff as well. Well, Bryan, you've been so generous with your time. I want to say thank you. Just take a minute to acknowledge you for coming on, for sharing your experience and your design, your aesthetic. And love seeing the projects that you guys are working on. Love seeing you guys continue to push the retail and restaurant game forward on the East Coast, all over the East Coast. And I just want to say thank you for you guys' experience, your dedication, your love of the game.
Absolutely, thanks, Adam, and can't wait to connect on the next deal and get some drinks one of these days.
Absolutely, yeah, maybe even in person. It's not as much fun drinking and looking at a computer screen. Although I make do, don't get me wrong, I still make do, but it's not quite as much fun.
All right, buddy. Thank you.